Hello and welcome to the secret history living inside of your aquarium. Today we are going to be talking about Neocaridina shrimp and their family tree, how they have been selectively bred into the colors you know and love that are in the hobby now, and how they got there, the process, starting with these wild types that were basically a clear color with some either brown, light brown stripes, as found over here with a little bit of tan and yellow, or reddish, rusty brown stripes, or darker stripes or patches. So those are the three wild types of Neocaridina davidi. And then there's also a clearer type of almost an opalescent or translucent filter shrimp known as the Neocaridina palmata. Now, they all scavenge, they all filter a little bit, but these shrimp have become hybrid, they've become selectively bred, and they have done so in an incredibly short amount of time. So the history is a short history, even though it has spawned an immense amount of diversity within the phenotypes. Now, when I say phenotypes mean the physical manifestations of how a creature looks. So they may have a similar genotype, but their phenotype will be completely different. It's like looking at a tabby cat and that's black versus one that's yellow. They're both still the same species, but they have different outward appearances in surface ways. So that is what has happened basically with the Neocaridina family. Now, the only thing that's a little different is that the palmata shrimp, rather than the davidi, which is the main family in which we find our cherry shrimp and blue jellies and blue dreams and bloody marys and green jades, they all kind of come from the davidi family, we are guessing, whereas the palmata have all of the pearl variants and possibly some of the jelly variants. Names get thrown around quite a bit and get changed a lot for marketing reasons. And let me go into the history one moment here, and that is to say that the wild cherry shrimp has been kept in aquariums for probably since the 1970s. It has been kept as just a clear kind of feral shrimp, eating and looking graceful like a ghost shrimp or something along those lines. But it has been selectively bred since the 1990s at least. First by hobbyists. The oldest records I can find are in the late 90s, 97 or so, that people are starting to select the red striped ones into being a tiger stripe. Before it was known as tiger stripe caridina, which is a whole other species of shrimp. They don't interbreed. We'll talk about that later. It makes it confusing. But they were called tiger shrimp for a brief time in the hobby before they were called cherry shrimp. And then they went from this striped red cherry or orangish color into more and more solids as they have been selectively bred. Now, while all this is going on, you could say we have one nice red cherry shrimp here, a Sakura red. That's no stripage. It's just a nice solid red shrimp. And from here, you basically branch off and you can find shrimp that are blue release. And that means it's the same as in the wild. Sometimes you'll find red release. And that is when a red shrimp has a baby that has a clear giant band and not so much striping, but rather solid on either end coloration. And the same thing can happen in the wild. That rusty color can manifest as an orange. And then one step from that, that orange can manifest as a orange really. Now, red really, orange really, they're a little bit subjective also because it just depends on where you say orange and red start and how refined the strain is, shall we say. But that's where those come from. And then from there, those or these can throw blue release. And because of the color pigmentation, as we get darker into the colors, in the wild, they have the genes to be a dark brown or black color, which means that they likely have pigments of green, yellow, red, brown, or a tan color, and blue. Because of that, those pigments can be separated into genes, and they are stacked when they're in the wild to cause a very opaque or solid color, non-translucent camouflage for hiding. Whereas in other cases, there's heavy stream light reflection and things like that, and so it is more it's more advantageous for them to remain striped with translucent sections. So those translucent sections, however, also carry the gene for blue sometimes. And so we find these first ones throwing from the Sakura line as early as the early 2000s, blue lilies, which have red and on either end, but more and more of a blue center, which I happen to have in one of my tanks now, and I will show you how that starts later on in the video. Then people either took this and they bred it trying to get more solid white in the center rather than a blue clear color. It could happen either way. It could go straight this way, or it could go blue and then this way. Or that blue could be selected with the batch of its young, and all the blues can be put together to select more blue. Now, the first thing that I need to say about selective breeding in this chart is that it has a general trajectory, and this is to say this is the wild up here. This is how they are found here, here, and here, as well as here. And moving down for the most part is how they have been selected over time. By 2002, we were getting Sakura reds and maybe some fire reds into the United States. November of that year is the year that they started becoming available on the market. 2003 was the year that they really hit the market at big pet stores and things, and they came out of Singapore via way of Thailand, Japan, and Taiwan. So when we look at this chart, it generally means that the farther down the chart it is, the more heavily it's been selected for its traits and the more work that's gone into it. This is why you find higher prices on the blues and the dark reds or the Bloody Marys, as well as the carbons and the black roses, the green jades, the yellows, etc., is because people have had to spend maybe 30, 40, 50, 100 generations trying to get here. Now, luckily, shrimp have generations very quickly. And the colors on a shrimp chart like this, they don't mix like you would think paint mixes. So red plus blue isn't going to give you a purple shrimp. So don't ever try to breed your shrimp that way. There's one large surprise here, at least to that sort of logic, which is the cherry shrimp can breed an orange shrimp. Now, you'd think from orange, maybe you could get yellow or clear or brown or something like that. Well, it turns out you can also get green. So a green mated with a red, or an orange mated with a yellow or a red, or mated with another orange, can end up causing a green. So there are several paths to the same lineage, and that's why it gets tricky to figure this out. So if you know more than I do, which is a high likelihood if you are in the shrimp trade for the last decade, or 2 decades if you're really into it, then please feel free to let me know in the comments. And I also wanted to give credit to whoever made this chart. I could not find the source other than Pethro, which has been used many places, and there are several websites that seem to use it. So, going back to the chart. As we go down this chart, you can see that blue in the wild types are dark. So you start with a wild type that's dark. It then ends up as a chocolate shrimp. The chocolate shrimp start to have babies that are randomly blue. These are known as blue diamonds. Those blue ones are selected for the brightest blue and less blackened ones, and they end up with blue dream. But because they have that darker line from the wild anyways, they don't end up as a bright or translucent blue quite as frequently. Then moving on from there, people selected within that blue gene pool. Once this became a steady gene pool, and that 90%, let's say, or 95% of these, when mated with other ones of these, start having babies that look the same. You're not getting babies that revert, as we say, or throw. In the hobby, we'll say that shrimp threw a reverted form of itself. So that means that at any point, in theory, a blue dream or even these advanced shrimp, if you mate them with another shrimp somewhere off their lineage, you can end up all the way back at the start. And that's what happens is slowly over time, if you don't pull those shrimp out that start to look less intense, you will end up back with a wild type shrimp. It's almost as if they've gone feral. Same with pigs, for instance. They become wild boar and grow tusk again once they're let out. So this is why you pay more. This is why names mean something. These are the names on this chart that are definitely agreed upon as solid names. So we've got Blue Dream, Blue Diamond, Blue Velvet, Blue Really, Blue Carbon Really, Blue Jelly, Blue Riley, Blue Pearl. Those are the blues you're going to see. Other people talk about topaz or blueberry, things like that. A lot of these are arguably not agreed upon strains, but rather specific breeders, retailers, or distributors trying to market some combination of a strain, because there's no exact line where you say, okay, this is a new strain now. This is a whole new strain. I mean, there is here if you get green all of a sudden out of an orange shrimp, but there's not a way to say when a strain is complete that is definitive. Those are kind of arbitrary rules written up by people who hold contests and also by scientists, because it's very hard to understand sometimes where a species is different enough to become a new species versus a variant. And these are all the same species with different variants within them of their phenotypes. Now, the other thing that happens that's rather interesting, and I'll show you in my shrimp tank after we head over there, is that the shrimp in the wild, they go through phenotype changes. So the phenotype is there, and they may present themselves as a dark blue, but it may almost look like a carbon or a black rose, for instance. If you have blue dreams, I have a set that some of them are so darkly blue, they look black. And at what point are they black or blue? Well, it's at the point that you put them on light substrate and they stay black. So these creatures within them, for survival, have the ability, using hormones and little pigmentation markings on themselves, as well as diet and other factors that we don't fully understand yet, they have the ability to, when put on a light background, they can lighten up, and when put on a black or dark background, they can darken up. So if you have a blue jelly shrimp, you can make it more blue generally by putting it on a black background. You put it on a white background, and it's going to lighten up, become more translucent, and look like a lower grade shrimp. Like maybe it's not even a blue jelly, and that would be a low grade blue jelly. Now, same with when we talk about the higher grade cherry shrimps, such as the painted fire or the fire red, sakura red, painted fire. There's different assortments of these names, and some people break it down into A grade or SS or A double A grade. There's different systems in different countries, but for now we're just going to stick with these four because it's simpler. Now, within that, by this point, they have so much pigment in their system that you can't even see the eggs or the saddle. Whereas in these lesser grades, you can see the saddle. So there's certain cutoffs, such as here you see that not all the legs are red, whereas by fire level, all legs and antenna have a red hue to them. So it's little things like that that end up making a grade and that we can agree upon to this chart. Now, as I said, at any time, these can have a baby with an inferior mate or with an equal mate or even better mate sometimes. Maybe they're the inferior mate and move back down their lineage. So this shrimp can work its way back up. But some shrimp actually come from two different lineages. So they're using some vestigial gene, most likely, that's in their code. And maybe we don't understand this about genetics yet. There could be an epigenetic code. So epigenetics is what I was talking about when they tend to grow in their life darker or lighter in a long period of time rather than through active camouflage. That is a sudden change. Epigenetics are like similar to thinking, this isn't exact if you're a scientist, but for the everyday person, think about it as you go through puberty and you're still you still have your same genes when you're young, but by the time you're 19 or 20, something changed and your body changed and there was a code that was flipped on in there. There were hormones and signals in your DNA that decided when that happened, as well as environmental factors. But because of that, we get shrimp that change. And it could be possible that those epigenetic tags can be passed on too. We just don't know that much about that yet, especially in shrimp, let alone humans. So that's another interesting topic for maybe another time. But you can see here this deep red, it also happens here. And that's from a different wild source. So somewhere farther back up, there is a common ancestor, probably we'll call it up here, and that may even share some traits in here. And as they are bred randomly, these rarer and rarer genes start to appear, and to the point where you can get that blank spot with the black because you've combined this gene all the way down the line, but you can't do a straight cross this with a black rose and you'll get it. You might end up with a wild one. So there is a system of how these genes are dominant or not dominant, and if you interrupt that system, you take it back a step. So you may have a blue dream shrimp as far as you're concerned. You may think it's a blue dream, but it could also be something different that has reverted from down here and thrown back to a blue dream. More than likely that won't occur. You'll just get a lighter blue shrimp over time, and then at some point those light blues will breed back into a wild type. But the Bloody Marys have actually red flesh all the way through and through. Before, even with striping, they have red legs and flesh because that pigment is so solid due to this wild type having such strong pigment. Arguably, the blues, the same reason they have such vivid color. Now, with the greens, we have a little more instability in the yellows and the greens because they are the lighter shades. And when you first start out, you get a yellowy green from the orange shrimp. And also, some people claim that some of the blues threw green, or that even the palmata threw that. Now, we don't have good enough information to say for sure whether all of them came from one of these sources, because people have kept a lot of this secret, because if you have the only green shrimp in town, that's a big deal, and you don't want people to know that you can just mix this with this to get this. So rather than saying you mix this with this and you get this, it's saying that this can occur randomly from this selection, or if you cross these, or it can occur randomly from this selection. And that gives you a different green though. So you're going to have variations within that green gene pool. And green jade is selected from the best of the best green. And then there's green jade with a golden back or a golden stripe. And then people can cross in things like a pearl or a blue and add some turquoise to it sometimes. Sometimes it works out where it's like paint. But that's where the confusion lies, because nobody has been the official gatekeeper of the information on where these have been bred. But you can see this chart here, and you can see that wild shokos turn into chocolate. They can end up as shoko brown striped shrimp or different colors of brown. They can end up as Bloody Mary. They can end up as your darker blue shrimp, whereas your fire shrimp and things like that can throw rillies, which end up as your blue jellies once selected for. And all down the way, they end up at blue velvet as this electric blue color, which can be thrown from a blue carbon, a blue dream, or roundabouts through the blue jelly possibly. We don't know for sure. And in my previous video, I had discussed this, and I had been called out by several breeders who have, they know for a fact, they've had for 12 years, they've had this line and it threw this. It skipped a stage. Well, these genetics go all the way back up here, so it may be possible, but this is the commonly agreed upon, this is probably how it will unfold chart. So now let's take a walk over to the shrimp tank and look at the real deal, because this is actually going on in my tank right now. I have, as we speak, if we can get the light to turn on. All right, forget that light. We'll use this light. We don't need no one's lights but our own. All right, so we've got this light on. We're gonna take a look down here at the shrimp. So in here we have a mix of shrimp. This is my shrimp nursery. Where are they all right now? They're hiding because they already ate. So I've got some really electric red ones, right? And I've got some not so great ones that are their babies. So this one has turned out to be totally clear. This is a wild type. It may even signify that it has some palmata history back in its lineage. I don't know. That's to be found out. But we also have Blue Dreams that I got from Lucas Bretz. And these are a great solid line, and they produce such blue shrimp that they often look black. And in this light, they look black. But if you put them on a white substrate, they will turn out to be actually a lighter blue color, most likely. At the point in which they don't anymore, then they become a new shrimp. And it is possible that that can occur within a single generation. They become a new variant. Up here, we have my cold shrimp, not cold as in icy, but cold, C-U-L-L-E-D, which means pulled out and set aside or to be killed. These ones won't be killed. They'll be given to a pet shop or to friends. So right here, we have a nice example of a female, which I have selectively been breeding from other really red shrimp or Riley red shrimp to have as much white as possible. However, she has begun to show, if we get a look at her, some little bits of blue in her. And rather than staying clear like this guy here, she has blue to her. So in theory, we could breed her down with more types of her own that look like that and selectively get something that may be like a blue jelly. Now you can see over here, we also have a wild throne from the blue line that I had. And that is a separate blue line than Lucas's, and it has a green hint to it. Now, that is kind of odd, right? Because, you know, I haven't owned any green shrimp, and I haven't owned any yellow shrimp. So that is an interesting thing, how sometimes things get thrown, and shows you that perhaps the other line got dirtied and then cleaned up. But this is a pretty close representation, these shrimp you see in this cage little box that I'm taking to the pet store, of what you could expect in a wild shrimp of the lighter varieties. You've got the dark stripes with a little bit of tan and brown, and then you've got other variations such as a little more golden color to the shrimp's back and things like that. Now you have to remember these shrimp are also clear, so you're kind of seeing their insides, whereas this one here, if we can get it to focus, has a little more of a brown tan color, yellow color to it. So perhaps we could bring that line down if we really wanted to. Now, when talking about culling red cherry shrimp, you end up over here. Now, these are closer to what a wild, the first cherry shrimp would look like, that were known as tiger shrimp, sometimes incorrectly, or red cherry tigers. We're not talking about the Caridina variety of tiger shrimp. That's completely different. But they have no red legs. They have a lot of clarity on them, a lot of dots. And that pattern is not desirable because it doesn't show a refined breeder that has selected down the line, and so that's why those are cheaper. And even this red one here that you may think looks okay to the average eye, I can see through it. I can see its organs, I can see its ovaries and its saddle in the background there, and then in the male here you can see its organs. You can see that it's not quite solid color, and its legs are only partially red. Whereas my other shrimp, we have some electric reds that have all red legs, if you can see them through there, and they have a nice red hue. You can't see the saddle through them very well unless you put extremely bright light. And these are not Bloody Marys, these are just selected red cherry shrimp. So that's the basics of this. I hope this video helps you sort things out. This is my nursery tank where I put my shrimp of all different sorts from my other tanks. And then when they get big enough, I either cull them, like this guy's about to get pulled tonight, or I put them back into my other tanks. So, other tank, we'll take a look at real quick, see if we have any shrimp out and about, because, yep, and we do. So here we have one of Lucas's shrimp, and this is one of the weakest ones you'll ever see thrown because his shrimp are usually incredible. Whereas here we have a little bit of lightning. So this one may get pulled and set aside into my wild tank, because I like that real solid electric blue. But this is what produced the babies down below. I only have a couple females left in here right now. I need to order more from him. Great shrimp. Check it out, lrbaquatics.com if you can. But that is the mother of those dark shrimp and those light blue ones that were down in the tank below. But don't think, as I said, that mixing a blue and a red will make a purple. Now, purple is a shrimp that happens once in a blue moon, but is not made that way. So that is the basics on the genetics of them and why it is confusing and hard to track, and why multiple people and multiple experts may be very correct on their assertions of where certain genetic lines come from and certain traits come from, and how easily they can revert and then be re-refined and called another type of strain. So it's hard to figure out without the actual DNA, and that's what certain people are working on, including one of my followers of the channel. So if you have something to comment on, please do chime in the comments, and that goes to any breeder or anybody who has more questions about this. This is the second video. I'm trying not to use the word as much as the one I did this morning. I guess I was just thinking a little too much. So I will talk to you guys later. I hope you're doing well. Keep your tanks clean, your shrimp healthy, your fish happy, yourself clean and happy. Take care of your friends and family. Just spread the love, and remember, whatever you do, to swim on. We'll talk to you next time on The Secret History Inside Your Aquarium.